Hey friend, welcome to the Halfway to Dead podcast. I'm your host, Jen Lovell. Listen, you and I have reached that age where we are done with the bullshit. We know that midlife is our chance to flip the script and experience life on our own terms. It's time to reconnect with our higher selves and reclaim our inner peace. Are you ready with an open heart and an open mind? Awesome, you're in the right place. Hop in and ride shotgun with me on this midlife spiritual journey. Hey guys, welcome back. So my guest today is Stacey Brown. Stacey wrote the book Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender. And she also has a successful podcast, and it's called Spiritual Journey, Path to Awakening. And she does that one with her friend and mentor, Nimish. Listen, Stacey has had intuitive abilities her entire life. After a big family trauma, which we kind of talk about in this episode, she left her successful career as a hairdresser and dedicated her life to helping people on their journey to healing. And we all need that. So she does that through intuitive readings, spiritual mentorship, and some coaching. So I have all her links in the show notes as usual, so you can get to all her stuff because she's got some free resources on her website, and you can book a free call to see if she's the right fit for you. In this episode, we talk about her journey, which it's a doozy, guys. She's been through some stuff, and she helps us figure out how to discover our own gift of surrender and letting go, and how to move forward with purpose in midlife, even if you've had some pretty traumatic stuff. So let's jump in and let's just really have an open heart and open mind to everything that Stacey has to share with us. Hey, Stacey, thanks for being here today. This is fun.
It is. I'm really excited.
I am excited because I just got done telling everybody that I read your book, I don't know, probably a year ago. And so I was refreshing myself on it the last couple of days. And I was like, oh man, it all came back. I was like, I'm so glad she's coming because you've been through some stuff. And I know a lot of my listeners are going through this stuff. We're all in midlife figuring some things out and kind of pulling up stuff from our past and trying to heal. So I think you're going to be a really great person for this because, first of all, your story is really powerful. You've been through a lot of things that some women have only been through one or two of the things you've been through. And you've had your fair share, I guess. That's what I'm saying. Yes. You've had your fair share, Stacey. And I love that you've come back out on the other side of it because I think that's so important for us to not just acknowledge that we all have a lot of these things going on in our lives, but like there is a way through it and then back out of it. So that's going to be amazing. So we got some stuff to unpack. So let's tell a little bit of your story to everybody so they know what I'm talking about. These will be teasers, guys, and then you got to get the book because you got to read all about this. But yeah, tell me, let's just start all the way with your upbringing because a lot of my guests talk about things that were kind of programmed into them at a young age. And then we move on from there. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormonism. It was a very strict upbringing. It was very challenging because I felt like there was a standard that I was expected to live by that was virtually impossible to measure up to. And I found it to be really challenging for me. It was something that my father took very seriously. And in the Mormon faith, the men are the upholders of the way things work in the family dynamic. Yes. They're at the center of it. It's very male driven. And I really felt that. I really felt the impact of that and the pressure of that. And from as early as I can remember, I had anxiety, terrible, crippling anxiety that governed a lot of what I did and made it very hard for me to show up the way I was meant to.
Yes. And then that probably led you to make decisions because being a teenager is hard already. But because I had a stricter religious dad too, not in the Mormon church, but same thing. And so I know that, that's a lot to unravel later. And as a teen, when you're being told every darn thing you're doing is wrong, or don't do this or do this, it's tricky. And so, So what happened next? You were kind of a teenager as a Mormon.
Yeah, I didn't waste a lot of time trying to figure out life independently. I wanted to follow the teachings of the Mormon Church and get married and have babies. That's what
Yeah.
I was taught to do.
Yep.
That was the role of a woman. And so I graduated from high school and I went to college briefly. And while I was at college, I reconnected with somebody from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And we got engaged and we were married 2 months to the day after my 18th birthday.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So you just jumped in.
I mean, what do you know? What do you know at 18? I don't know, but I thought that I knew it all.
Well, but you think you know a lot because I also got married at 18. And so, I mean, I'm still married. I'm one of those rare things where it worked, but you don't know what you're getting into.
No.
But yeah. Okay. So you got married and that didn't really work out, right?
No, it was a very volatile relationship. I married a narcissist, much like my father. You know, we go to what we know.
Yes.
And what I knew was being with a man who was controlling and abusive. And that relationship brought a baby into the world, my oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly thereafter, we separated and divorced. And I started navigating life on my own as a single mom of one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard. It was really hard. It was shameful as far as my parents were concerned.
Right. In the church.
They were embarrassed about what I was doing and how I was living my life and the fact that I was divorced. I was divorced at 22. And that's the age that most people still haven't even gotten married. And here I was divorced and a single mom.
Yep.
And so I started embarking on a whole new season in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then, because when you were going through all of this, did you have a lot of support from your family?
No.
No. Yeah.
There was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of pressure because I was an embarrassment.
Yeah.
You know, the Mormon Church is not one that looks at divorce in a good way.
No.
And I was an embarrassment. I was something to be ashamed of.
Okay. So you didn't have a lot of support, but you were out on your own.
Yes.
And you're a mom, so you got to push through. You got to make it happen anyway,
Which I did.
right? Which you did. Yeah.
Yep.
So then that led you, I'm trying to remember the timeline in my mind here too, because then that led you went back to school.
I went back to school for a little bit. Yeah. And I was working in a dental office part-time. And during that time, I met my second husband and we got pregnant and therefore we decided to get married.
Yep.
And we ended up welcoming not one, but two little boys into our family. And unbeknownst to me, my husband was a struggling addict.
Okay.
And it threw me into a way of being that I didn't understand because I had no experience with addiction at all growing up. I mean, there were no substances that were abused in my household.
No, because you don't have coffee. You don't have like Pepsi.
Right.
You're like, no.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So this was all new, being around an addict. And so how did that, did it take you a little while to figure out even that this was an addiction?
Oh, yeah. It definitely took me years to figure out how severe it was. And by the time I recognized how severe it was, you know, I had 3 little kids total and was living as a stay-at-home mom. And I made the decision to put myself through beauty school as a single mom of 3 kids.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. I know. I keep telling you, a lot of these things paralleled for me in the book in different ways, but I also went back and got my degree with 3 kids. So it's just challenging. I know everyone listening out there knows if you've gone through any of this so far, you know it's a lot because you've already gone through divorce at this point. You've already gotten not a lot of family support. You're raising your kids, but still wanting to do better for yourself and your kids. So you become a cosmetologist, right?
Yeah. And a really successful one.
Yeah. Because you owned your own business.
Yeah. Owned my own business and really felt the passion of a career that I fell in love with. I loved working with clients. And I noticed as I was working with them that I would put my hands on people and I would sense or feel what they were
Okay.
going through. And so I would just kind of guide the conversation in that direction. But I believe that it's what made me really successful was I could dial in on what my client was going through and lead them to a space of kind of a healing space while doing their hair. And I didn't say this is
Right.
what I could do. I just let it
Because
lead.
we don't go to get our hair done and that just to get our hair done. You become a little therapist behind that chair. You're going through it with your clients a lot of times.
100%.
Yeah, because I can only imagine the
Yes.
stories that you heard, from behind that chair and everything else. So did you feel like your intuition was awakening, but you didn't have a name for it yet? Or did you know?
I feel like I've always had an intuitive sense, but I definitely feel like it was awakening more being behind the chair and seeing how I was helping people. I just felt like there was something happening that I didn't really know how to explain, but I was opening up to
Yeah.
spirituality in a powerful way. And during this time, I also got certified as a Reiki practitioner.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So would you say, and we haven't really got to some of the other things yet, but you always felt like you had some intuition, like it didn't line up with being a Mormon. So you probably suppressed it a little bit back then at those ages. And then
Very
it
much
was
so.
just starting to kind of take a hold of you as you were working with your clients. Because you were having to lay your hands on them. You were touching them. So that made that energy even stronger, I'm sure. Okay. So at this point, you have 3 kids, right? And you're married to your second husband, right? Or second husband.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm married to my second husband. Yeah. And we divorced. And I put myself through beauty school. And I'm now a single mom with 3 little kids and working a full-time business and managing children. And it's chaos, but I'm definitely thriving.
You're doing well. Throughout this whole time, though, you're struggling with your own anxiety and depression, right? I mean, that was just
on and off throughout my life.
You're going through all this, and you still got this heavy jacket on of all of this anxiety and mental, just struggling. You're struggling. Okay. So, and then you experienced a husband that had some addiction issues. And was that a struggle you shared with him closely or not really?
I mean, it was a struggle that I shared with him closely because we had children mutually that we were raising. So it definitely impacted me deeply. And it also pushed me to want to find a partner to share in the burden of life. It made me even more driven to find that connection with someone because my ex-husband was falling apart due to addiction and wasn't very present in my children's lives. And so I was going to beauty school at the time with some girls who set me up on a blind date with their uncle, random. And I went out on a blind date with their uncle, and over time, he became my third husband.
Perfect. Okay, so you're married and you've found this perfect guy, right? You're thinking it's this perfect guy. I did it.
Right.
I feel like I'm in a sitcom. What's next, Stace?
So we have another baby. So I now have 4 children, and I am running a business in the beauty industry full time. I am raising 4 kids. I am homeschooling one of them through high school, and I'm raising a newborn.
Yeah.
And I come to find out that my third husband also has an issue with addiction.
Yeah.
Devastating.
You're like, how am I here again?
Yes. And at the same time, my second husband had been on this deep journey of self-discovery and healing from addiction and had some sober time under his belt. And I leave my third husband and I do what every sound mind woman does. And I go back to my second husband.
Yep. You definitely had a pattern, right? Yep. You had a pattern.
Yes. 100%.
Okay. So you're back. And so this is the father that you had the 2 boys with, right? Okay. So you guys get back together. You're both sober.
Yeah, we're both sober. We're both living this beautiful life. And we had what I thought was
Yeah.
the fairy tale. He was finally sober. We were back together. We bought a beautiful home in the country. I was running my business out of our home, and life was looking really good. We were going to church together,
Yeah.
not the Mormon church. We were going to a non-denominational family church in our community. We were teaching classes on marriage. We were in an absolutely incredibly beautiful space in life.
Yeah. You were the it couple, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so in comes right about now. You've got some teenagers now, right? Your kids are getting a little bit older.
Yeah.
And so you had some struggles as a mom, as a parent too, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it took me so long to get my life together and feel stable myself. And as I'm finally feeling stable and life is looking really beautiful, my 17-year-old son, my older son, Dylan, started struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues. And it was so hard to watch because out of my 4 children, he was the last one that I thought would have struggled. He had everything going for him, was starting lineup in the high school football team. He got great grades. He was good in school. He would come in and work in the salon with me, and he just seemed very focused on having a healthy future. And it happened really, really fast. He went from being healthy and successful to what felt like overnight struggling. And 5 years ago, in January of 2019, he overdosed in our home on a cocktail of household medications that he researched online how to get high from. And we found him in the middle of the night in a psychotic state. And he survived that overdose. And then 4 months later, he attempted to take his own life by running his car into a tree at 100 miles an hour.
And so and we talk about those moments that change everything. And this changes everything. And so you had to struggle through this with him, obviously, as a parent, which is really hard. So you've been through a lot at this point already. Did you feel like that was the moment when you really started waking up spiritually?
I would say through the time that he was in the hospital and fighting for his life, I started having some profound spiritual encounters that made me feel like I was awakening to something different. But I wouldn't say that I had the clarity during that time to recognize it for what it was. I just knew that I was having some mind-blowing experiences and that something was changing. So it was like my world was falling apart and I was opening up at the same time. And that's a really weird place to be because my marriage was disconnected. My life was disconnected. I had stopped working to take care of my son and be bedside. So like life as I knew it was falling apart, but something in me was shifting.
Because you actually had an experience, I'm trying to remember in the book, where your son was basically in a coma, induced coma, and he came to you in your sleep. I mean, he came to your room.
Yeah. I had a powerful experience where, they didn't know what was going to happen with my son. They didn't know if he was going to survive or not. And we were going home every night for like a couple hours of sleep and then driving back to the hospital. And on one particular night, we got in bed and I remember hearing my husband breathing next to me. Like I knew he was asleep, but I don't remember falling asleep myself. And as I was laying there, my son walked into the room and he was healthy and in mind, body, spirit. And I can remember what he was wearing. He was wearing a gray hoodie and his skinny jeans, and he had a baseball cap on. And as he sat down on the edge of my bed, he flipped the baseball cap around and he said, "Mom, I don't know what to do because I've seen this." And he pointed to the corner of my room and I saw this bright white light that I believe was God. And on one side was my grandfather and on the other side was my husband's grandfather. And he said, and if I stay, I have a huge mess to clean up. And then he looked at me as if asking me what he should do. And I said, it's not up to me.
Yeah.
And then he was gone. And it was very jarring in the sense of like, this thing happened to me, but I somehow fell asleep that night. When I woke up the next morning, I recounted the story to my husband, and my husband collapsed to his knees and he was like, oh my God, he's going to die. Our son is going to die. We have to get to the hospital. And so we proceeded to the hospital. And when we were on our way to the hospital, I heard my son's voice and he said, send dad in when they wake me and I'll prove that I was in your room. And at this point, I'm thinking, I've got to be crazy. Like, this is crazy.
Right.
I have lost my mind. And we went into the hospital. And when your child is in a medically induced coma, they do it to let the brain rest and heal, but they'll intermittently wake you up from the coma to slowly stimulate your brain. And so I waited in the waiting room and my husband went in when they woke him. And when he came out, he had tears streaming down his face. And he said, Dylan confirmed in 2 ways that he was in our room last night. And I was like, I told you, like, I'm not crazy. This experience happened. We proceeded to go home that night and the phone rang at, I don't know, like late in the night, like 11, 12 o'clock at night, the phone rang from the hospital and it was his nurse. And she was like, I want you to know everything's okay. But Dylan keeps mouthing because he had a trach. So he wasn't speaking, but he was mouthing words. And she was like, he keeps mouthing the same thing over and over again. He keeps saying, I was upstairs. I was upstairs. I was upstairs. And it was further proof that he had been in our room for this vision that happened to me. And there was no denying that he was confirming that he had been there.
Does he remember, like after the fact, does he remember it now? No.
No, he doesn't remember anything from the hospital. He was so heavily medicated throughout the experience that he doesn't remember much of anything of that time, which is sad because it was such a powerful experience. But I believe it was meant for me as opposed to for him.
Right. Yeah. It was assigned to you. Okay. So, geez, that's almost enough to take anybody out right there. Like, I don't know. I think I would probably spend a good amount of time in bed. So you kept going. You have to. You're a mom. You've got a business. You got to keep going, right?
Yeah. At this point, my business was on hold. I was trying to do a little bit of hair here and there, but though my son survived and he was told if you use, it could kill you, when we brought him home, he pretty much started using again right away. And he wasn't even strong enough to get around the house walking normally, but he had friends sneaking alcohol into the house and the addiction continued. And with that, it was like I stopped living my life and I became consumed with trying to save my son.
Yeah. Yep. So you weren't working. And then was this around the time that you really started like getting things back on track again? Or
I would say I was still falling apart. I definitely had some powerful spiritual encounters. We've talked about one of them, but there were several during the time he was in the hospital. And I had these powerful encounters, but I didn't really know what to do with them because my son was still in the throes of addiction and I was in survival mode. So it was like, yes, I was having an awakening, but I wasn't truly able to honor that awakening in the midst of all of the chaos. It wasn't until my son moved out and started his recovery journey that I really started exploring what was going on with me. And I happened to stumble upon a social media app called Clubhouse. That's an audio only app. And I started telling my story. I started openly expressing what I had been through. and talking to people about it. And when I started opening up about it and talking about it, it was like I was removing the shame. I was removing the guilt, and I was transforming through that process into this new season of my life that had me deeply desiring to use my gifts and abilities to help other people.
Yes. So would you say that this is the point? So your book is Journey to Soul Center, and Soul Center is kind of the name of your clubhouse. Is that right?
Yeah.
Clubhouse room. Okay. But you talk about, and then it's discovering the gift of surrender. So what was the moment you really felt like you surrendered?
Oh, I can tell you exactly the moment I surrendered.
Okay.
I will never forget it. So before my son overdosed, I was on my way to the grocery store one day, and my husband and I were involved in what was called a discipleship program, where our local church challenged us to abstain from listening to secular music and watching TV, etc., for a period of time and focus just on our spiritual well-being. And I happened to be listening to a podcast that was a recorded sermon, and it was talking about superheroes and how we as human beings, we think that superheroes are these powerful beings that have abilities beyond humans, that they can scale a building, or they can fly, or they can lift a car. And what a superhero actually is someone who gives up the idea of what their life is going to look like for whatever God has in store for them. And as I was pulling into the grocery store parking lot, the pastor who was doing the sermon said, "Who wants to be a superhero? Raise your hand." And though I was in the car by myself, I raised my hand.
Take that.
And I was like, this is it. Like, I want to do that. And he said, okay, if you want to be a superhero, put your hands out, palms facing up, and say the words, "I surrender, God, use me." And from the bottom of my heart, I surrendered that day. And it was shortly after that my son overdosed. And I believe that that experience was preparing me, that I was giving up the idea of what my life was going to look like for whatever God had in store for me. And I'll never forget it.
No. And so that was your surrender moment, basically.
That was my surrender moment. Yeah.
And then just because we surrender doesn't mean there's not more stuff coming at us, because then all of a sudden everything hit the fan, right? But did you feel more ready for it then, because you surrendered to that? Because we all have ideas of what we want our lives to look like, right? I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and everything's going to be perfect eventually. And it's not. It's never going to be perfect. And then stuff just keeps coming at us. So did you feel like this actually helped? I mean, obviously it helped. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it was a genuine surrender. It was a heartfelt surrender. But in the moment of what I was going through, the only thing that was really keeping me going was doing clubhouse rooms where I was talking about what I had been through and the lessons I had learned. And then I started serving other people. I started doing readings for people on Clubhouse and on Facebook Live. And I started kind of embarking on the journey. I met my now business partner, Nimesh, through Clubhouse. And I had never been out of the United States in my life. And we agreed to me taking a trip to meet him in person a couple months later. And I got on a plane and met him in person. And it was the beginning of me really opening up to what it meant for me to be having a spiritual awakening and what I was going to do with it. And we channeled a mentorship program in his kitchen. We wrote my book in his kitchen. And all of these beautiful things started happening where I recognized that I was being led on a completely different journey than what I had ever anticipated. And I chose to give up my career in the beauty industry to dedicate my life to helping people in a whole different way.
Okay. So, and by the way, and you just call them NIMS, right? I mean, so this is, you guys, we talked about the podcast at the beginning. This is who she does one of her podcasts with, right? Are you just doing the one podcast right now?
Yep.
With NIMS? Okay.
Yep. We do the one podcast. I've been on the podcast since episode 17, and we just recorded episode 170.
Yes. So you guys have done all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
And so you guys even do like combination readings as part of your service.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Nimesh,
that's what I had.
Yeah.
I had one with both Stacey and Nimesh, and it's a really cool combo. Tell us about that part.
Yeah, so Nimesh had been exposed to the Akashic records and had been doing readings for people from around the world. And he encouraged me to experience the Akashic records, which I had never even heard of Akashic records before. It's basically a history of everything your soul has been through in this life, in past lives, in future lives, in parallel lives. And he encouraged me to attempt to open the records and see if I was capable of doing what he was doing. And after a couple of sessions with him, I really got into it. And we decided as one of our services that we were going to offer a very unique experience. And I know no one else who does what we do, but we read Akashic records together for people. And we do readings where he's representative of the divine masculine and I'm representative of the divine feminine. And we help people on their healing journey through Akashic record readings. Because you could each tap
into a different type of the Akashic record, or explain why those two sides are so important.
There's just some kind of divine balance that it creates. And it's really hard to explain because, again, this is something that was new to me in the process, but it was something that we felt prompted to do together. And there's just some power in representing both parts of the masculine and the feminine energy in this process and bringing our own unique gifts and abilities to the table at the same time has provided a really unique experience for the people that we've been reading for. And we've done readings now for people literally from around the world. I mean, we just did a reading for someone this last week in India. So it's word spreads.
Absolutely. So you guys, so you're intuitive because you're not necessarily tapping into past loved ones that have passed away, because we've talked to people on the show who that's what they do. That's and I won't call it a gift because I know everyone can do these things if you've honed into them, right? So, but are you tapping into not just our Akashic records, but our spirit guides? Yes.
100%. Yep. Spirit guides, angels, ascended masters, any beings that can help us deliver the message we're tapping into. And there's a specific prayer that we say in the process. I mean, it's a very formal process.
You have a very specific way you start every session with a prayer and getting permission to tap into our Akashic records and all of that. And I've heard, so what's going to come through is whatever that person needs to hear, right? You're never going to be told anything you can't handle or you weren't meant to know right now, right? Yeah. So you're not going to hear something that you weren't meant to hear or that's going to be damaging. I guess is what I'm saying for anyone who's kind of nervous about readings still out there. So here's my question, because, all right, you were in the Mormon church and then you were just talking about how you were listening to different sermons. You were in a non-denominational church. So how have you connected with some of the things that you believed during those times and what you currently believe? Because I know many people struggle with that blockage, being blocked, or like things that have been kind of programmed into you throughout your life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it was recognizing that what I had been taught didn't align with me was the first step, and releasing that. So I left the Mormon church when I was 22. And shortly thereafter, in a very public way, my father left my mother. And when he left my mother, he left the Mormon church. And when he left the Mormon church, everybody else in my family left the Mormon church. So it was like there was a part of me in my 20s that my dad gave me the message that everything he had taught me was a lie.
Yeah.
And I had to like refigure out what that looked like. And it took me up until everything started happening with my son, where I was exploring religion and exploring what I believed in God. I had to kind of go on a journey to get there. And it took me some time, right? I tried to fit in with different religions and that didn't work. I've tried different modalities, trying to figure out what aligns with me and what doesn't. And with that time has come this self-discovery that there are certain tools and things that I align with, and there are certain things that I don't. And it's all been about self-exploration and self-discovery.
Right. So just what feels right to you, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And releasing the idea that it has to be what someone else tells me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think for so long, it was someone telling me how to be, how to live, how to do things. And clearly it wasn't working. And so I had to kind of start figuring out, okay, what works for me, what aligns with me, what resonates with me, what feels right to me. And once I started figuring out what felt right to me, that's when things started to change.
Because not everything we're taught in each religion is wrong or bad, but it does feel like it's fear-based a lot, religion. It's very fear-based, because that's what I experienced too. It was more about what you're not allowed to do than building your relationship with God. And so does that feel like the main difference between like religion and spirituality?
Yeah, I think that spirituality is more free-flowing and a way of being, and religion is more regimented and someone else telling you what you believe and how you should behave.
Okay. So, because I had someone ask me once recently, actually, I was sitting somewhere and she looked at me and she said, so like with all this stuff you're doing, do you feel like you can still like, is it still okay to pray to God? And I was like, oh my gosh, like she doesn't get this at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like what? You know? And so I tried to explain like, no, I feel much closer to God now. Like, I don't think you're because I think people have this, if you're in a strict church, which you know what strict churches are like, this is all like craziness to them. Okay. Like, because they picture us all like hanging our crosses upside down and like just weird stuff. Like all of a sudden we're satanic. That's not what this is at all. Like the spiritual journey and awakening is not about any of that, because I feel closer now. And it sounds like you do too, with God, with praying with angels, just with the whole spirit team. And then you feel, it's just a very different feel than when I was in religion.
Yes. And I absolutely could agree with that.
Because people worry a lot about where Jesus fits into this. Okay. I mean, this is a big block for a lot of people I know listening right now, even because I've spoken with people who, like myself, were programmed a certain way from a young age. And so finding your way out of that, like you said, it takes time. This isn't an overnight thing.
Oh, no, it took me decades. You have
to just start thinking, does that sound right to me? Does that feel right to me? You know, to judge, to condemn, to all these things. And for me, same as sounds like for you, like it was, a lot of that didn't match up anymore. And it isn't
very much so.
Anti-Christianity, anti-Mormon, anti-any religion. Spirituality is just more about your own experience, right?
Yes, your individual journey and what resonates with you.
Okay, so that's one of those blocks I just know that you've been through. Yeah, so I thought you might have some tips for us on that, getting through there. And that because you still have friends that are part of the church, or not really anymore?
I mean, I do. Like specifically when I was doing hair, I had a lot of clients who were still Mormon. And we just peacefully agree to disagree. You know, I respect what they're choosing for themselves and that it works for them. And I feel like they respect, at least externally, that I'm doing what works for me. And I have felt a peace about that I'm truly honoring what is correct for me and letting everything else go.
So we have established that you guys, Stacey's been through some stuff because, I mean, you've heard everything so far, but there's so much more in the book. There's just a lot of other things, guys. So you got to read to really get into some of the details of this. But Suffice to say, she's been through some rough times. She knows where you're at if you're out there listening. If you're going through something right now, Stacey knows what you're going through. And so I want to start talking about different ways that you think would help us to embrace our own personal, our own personal traumas and the things we've been through and lead us to that surrender and on to like the right path. If we start to realize, oop, I veered off. Like this doesn't feel right for me. I need to get back on track. And I've been through all these things. And how do I move forward? How do I get out of bed? How do I take the shower and start getting back to life? So do you have things that really helped you in some of your darkest times?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, one of the main things I do is spiritual coaching and mentorship, and I help people to awaken that part of themselves. I really believe a lot of the answer lies in what we do on a daily basis and how we nurture ourselves consistently. And I believe that there are some core things that we can do that help us. So the first thing that I would say is a huge help is making sure that you take time to meditate or time in silence. This can be in nature. This can be in your home. In nature is always better because we're outside of our home and our ego is quieter. But taking time to be introspective with yourself is really important. Another step that I feel is really powerful is journaling. I am a big believer in journaling. If you go to my website and register, you can get a free journaling template that uses my guide that I've taught hundreds of thousands of people how to journal. But so silence, time in nature, journaling. And then I also think having some daily practice of moving your body in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be rigorous exercise. It can be yoga, it can be stretching, but having that movement in your body is really important. And then I think there's foundational things that fall by the wayside when we're not in a healthy space, like eating right and showering and putting makeup on or putting a cute outfit on, like doing things that make you feel good in the moment. Because when you feel good in the moment, you're going to show up as that version of yourself. Right. And so I definitely think that there's something to be said for the daily habits that we cultivate over time. And as we cultivate those daily habits, then we can show up the way that we're meant to. And I don't want to simplify it for anybody who's in the state of trauma right now, because when you're in the trauma, these things can feel like you're walking through concrete, right? It can feel very overwhelming. It can feel very daunting to try to journal or to try to meditate. But I believe as we're coming out of the trauma, these are things that we can do to help ourselves and to continue to nurture that spiritual
so
component.
If we wanted to start a journal, like you said, you can go on. She has all kinds of free resources for all kinds of different things on the website. But because sometimes it is overwhelming to just have that pen in your hand and there's a blank page and it's just too much. Like we don't know what to write. So it's great because even in the book, you have different like little prompts at the end. You have the little life lessons at the end of the chapters and then like a question, which to me, the questions are like a journal prompt, really. Right. So what would you recommend for someone just wanting to start journaling now when they're looking at that blank page? Do you just come up with a question first or?
So I would say if you're just getting started with journaling, I would start with like a 5-minute practice where you list 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for and be intentional, right? We all can say, I'm grateful for my family or I'm grateful for my friends. But one of the things that I'm going to say is, I'm grateful that I got to be on Jen's podcast today and have a heartfelt conversation with her, right? That's a lot more intentional and present and in the moment. So really being specific about what you're grateful for is important. And I would say starting with gratitude. Gratitude naturally boosts our mood. Okay. So having a practice of gratitude is really important. And then I think having a daily affirmation, what is a statement that you can say about yourself that you believe? Is it, I am healing? Is it, I am loved? Is it, I am enough? Having something that you say, and then having some kind of reflection from the day. What was a lesson or a takeaway that you learned from your day? What was an encounter that you had with somebody that was powerful? And leaving it at that basic practice as you're getting started. Because if you do my journaling template will take you 15 to 20 minutes to do. And when you're first starting journaling, that might not be the space that you're in. You might be telling yourself, I have 5 minutes. That's all I can give to this. And in that 5 minutes, I would say the most important thing is the gratitude. Expressing from a space of recognizing that things are working out for you, that a conversation was powerful, that an interaction you had was impactful. Staying in that space on a consistent basis, a daily basis, is going to help shift your mood, and it's going to bring you into a healthier space.
It doesn't have to be big things we're thankful for. You have to have big, exciting days.
No.
It could just be like, I'm grateful my grocery store has a pickup service. I mean, it could be anything that just made your day a little bit easier, right? I'm thankful that my dog didn't get me up in the middle of the night last night and I got a good night's sleep. It could be so simple, right? So I don't want people to think they have to have these big life-changing moments to journal about it, because it could be anything.
No, and I think it means more when they're little moments. I feel like because we're all having little moments, but we're not acknowledging them. And when you take the time to journal, you're acknowledging those little moments, and those little moments add up into big things.
Big things. And so, okay, so we're journaling. Do you think also we get to a point where we need to, I know you talk in your book about sometimes you have to change the environment you're in. Sometimes you have to change the people you surround yourself with, which those aren't easy things at all. But do you have any other thoughts on that? Like what makes that so important?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a relationship where my partner and I were handling our son's addiction completely different. And I was becoming an advocate, and I was finding my voice, and he was shutting down. And it sent us into a space of being like oil and water, living together. And the beautiful life that we had once had didn't exist anymore. And so I had to make the decision to leave that marriage and to find a space where I could practice the beliefs and the values that I had in a safe space where I felt comfortable. And so I moved into my own place and started establishing a totally different life. And it's been a powerful practice for me to be in a space where now I'm making the decisions for myself independently, and there's no one else making those decisions for me.
Right. And that's not, changing that environment wasn't easy for you. You didn't just walk out of the home with your husband into your new home, right?
No.
I mean, I'm trying to think back. I mean, I feel like you even had to live with your ex for a small amount of time.
I did.
So you guys, sometimes the journey isn't what you thought it was going to be, but you're still heading in the right direction. So it's still going to be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And my ex, gave me a safe space to be and I lived there for like 9 months and continued to pursue my dream of my business. And I did it one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. And yeah, it wasn't glamorous, but it was being true to me.
Yeah. You were still felt like you were on the right path the whole time. Heading in the right direction. That's all we need to do, right? We just got to keep heading in the right direction and I'm sure you've been through so much, and in your mind, you could still go through more, right? You know that. We all know 100%. That there could be more coming, but being in a better place, like you said, like you've gotten to know yourself better. You've gotten stronger with your spirituality and just, you're on the right path. That will make things easier anyway, right? Less intense as things come at us. Because no one here is pretending we're in midlife that like we've been through everything we're going to get through. We all know there's more coming. There's always more coming. And so we just try and prepare ourselves the best we can. So you had one little quote in your book. I want to pull it out here. It's not a quote. Okay, so it's one of your questions because I thought it was a good one. Let me find it here for you. Okay, so one of them is, you say that this is one of her life lessons at the end of a chapter. Changing circumstances doesn't necessarily change our programming. Unless we face our demons and heal, nothing will change. So when you're starting to that journey And it could be childhood trauma. It could be your own addictions, your own mental, it could be anything, our demons, right? Do you have any suggestions for how to start pulling those things out and dealing with them?
Yes. Yes. Get somebody to help you.
Okay.
I don't believe that this is something that we can navigate on our own. Whether it's, a mentor like myself, whether it's a therapist, whether it's, a pastor of your church, somebody that you trust. I believe that we have to go through this process with somebody guiding us, because when you're on the inside, it's very, very hard
to see out,
see what that impact is, to see those lessons clearly. And sometimes it takes somebody coming up alongside of us to help us with that process. And ironically enough, what's crazy about this whole process is my very first mentorship client that I ever had was a man who was leaving the Mormon church. And since then, I've helped several people on their journey to leaving the Mormon church or leaving other faiths that they didn't feel aligned with. And I don't believe that it's a process that you can go through by yourself. I believe it's something that you need somebody there to act as a sounding board, somebody who is unbiased, somebody who has a level head that can say, okay, this is what I see from my vantage point, and therefore help with the process.
Yes, because it has to be someone who's not in your inner circle already.
Right.
Because you need someone who can look at this from the outside, because we're too close to it. A lot of times we're just too close to it. And so it's not like we can go to our best friend, or we need to find someone who can give us a different perspective and help us navigate through the whole thing, whether
100%.
they've been through it or not. That can give us that whole, okay. Yep, that's really good. And that, like I told you, I know people struggle with the religion thing. So that's interesting that, you know what I mean? Some of your clients are trying to leave their programmed upbringing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And know that they need support. I mean, to leave the organization or the structure of what you were taught from the time you were a child
really
into
hard.
adulthood is not an easy process to navigate. And doing it by yourself, to me, I don't see how I would have been able to do it by myself. I've had therapists, I've had mentors come into my life that have helped me to release that programming and to understand what I actually believe and help me to figure out that clarity for myself.
Okay, so we need a coach. We need a coach.
Yeah.
I agree, because throughout my spiritual journey, I've had different people too, like at different times that have helped me. So that's perfect. Okay, and here's another life lesson from our book, you guys. Okay, and I know that all my midlife, especially women out there, you're gonna agree with this. We are not here to fix people, not even our own children. Ultimately, it's up to us to save ourselves. When you know, and then you talk about how, when we get on an airplane, we're supposed to put our oxygen masks on first before we help our kid. So, and you have, obviously you have struggled with this already.
Yes.
Because especially we figure out midlife, we have given ourselves to a lot of people and not to ourselves.
Yes.
Okay. And so this is a time when we start to look back at, what do I need now? Like, I can't save everybody. I can only save myself, right? And it doesn't have to be that dramatic save. I can only make myself happy. I can only fill my own cup, right? We can't expect that out of others. And especially that is a struggle with children, because boy, do we want to help them make sure everything goes how we planned.
Yes.
And then when things aren't going how we planned, it's like, oh, geez, what do I do now? So what about that? Do you have any tips with the struggles you've been through with your own children? Any tips you have for people out there right now that might be struggling with whether they're teenagers at our age now or they're full-grown adults, whether it's mental health, addiction, anything? How do you stay on your own path while allowing them to be on theirs?
I think it's one of the most challenging things that I've ever had to face. And I think that we would be doing a disservice to simplify it too much for people, because it can be all consuming. But I would say the number one thing is you have to keep on living even when your child is struggling. And what I mean by that is you can't get lost in another person's pain, because when you do, that pain will pull you under. And there's got to be boundaries. And sometimes that can be really, really challenging with teenagers, right? Because you're in charge of them, they're living in your space, in your house, and that toxicity carries over. But I think that I tried for a very long time to save my son when he didn't want to save himself. And when I finally let go and allowed him to figure stuff out, he hit rock bottom. And that's when he finally got help and turned his life around. I had to let go.
And like you said, that is the hardest thing I think that we can ever do as a parent, as a mom, as a parent at all, because the closest thing we have to our own little hearts walking around on 2 feet is our children. And so it's incredibly hard to watch that. And this is probably another reason why you need someone, a mentor, something, right? Because we don't have to walk and do all this alone, because there are a lot of people who have come before us and aren't even through it. And like you said, someone who doesn't know us and our children. I think that's important. We need someone who from the outside, who doesn't know our children, who doesn't really know our whole story, and can say, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I think you should
having
do.
An unbiased party and knowing that we're all in this race of life together, but some of us are just a little further along in the race than others. And we have a responsibility when we're running this race to turn around and say, hey, there's a hill at mile 10, right? Like, right. And reach out and be there and be a support for those who come after us. And I think that's what has made me so passionate about what I do is I want to help those people that are struggling in the way that I was when I couldn't find any help or support. And it wasn't until, I went through this process that I really understood that we're really lacking in support for people who are going through transitions like this with their children. We don't have the resources that we need in order to help parents who are struggling with kids with mental health, with addiction. The resources are not there. They're just not.
They're not there. And we feel like we're alone because everyone's pretending everything's fine at home.
Yes.
Right? We're all putting on a show that, especially with freaking social media and everything else. Everybody wants to look like they have this perfect life. And if we would all just cut that out and be supportive instead of judgy to other parents, to other spouse, people in their marriage, just stop judging. Everyone's got their own path they're on and be more supportive. Because if we haven't walked in those shoes, like if you haven't walked in the shoes of having a child with an addiction, you just don't get it.
No.
Okay. You don't get it. If you've not been through divorce, you don't get it. If you've not been through your own mental health crisis, it's just hard to see that in other people because you don't understand it. So if we could just not judge others, that'd be great to start with. Let's not judge others and then find our people that do understand it and work through it. Yeah. Right?
100%.
We can come out the other side. Yeah. We just have to find we got to find our people.
We got to find our people.
We got to find our people. Yes. Because I always talk about we need that one friend or someone we can call for emotional support and everything. But then we need somebody that tells us to it like it is, gives us a whole 360 view of what's going on and can really help us get through it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And not just agree with everything we're saying. Right. which is hard because we love when people agree with us.
Right. And we've got to be in a season where we're open to hearing that, right? Where we're open to receiving that constructive criticism, or we're open to hearing people speak the truth to us. And that can take time. Like I was not prepared for that when everything happened with my son. It took some time before I was in a space where I was ready to hear you can't save him. You've got to save yourself. And that was hard for me. It took time.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So if you guys are out there listening and a lot of these things Stacey's been through, you're connecting with, she might be the right person for you, is what I'm saying. You're trying to find your people to coach you. And so I guess I just want to make sure and this is part of why I had her share her story, not just to go through all the things again, but so that you can hear there are people out there going through the things, just like you're going through the things. There are people out there going through it. And so I think it does give you more confidence sometimes to reach out to someone has been through some of your same stuff.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Because they're going to have an understanding of it from the same angle you've understood it. which is important. And so, okay, because here's all the things she does, you guys. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but you can get an intuitive reading. So what's the difference between just your intuitive reading and your Akashic record reading?
So an Akashic record reading is going to delve into past life experiences, whereas an intuitive reading is just a standard reading, tapping into my intuition. We're not going into past lives. We're simply talking about whatever issue we're targeting on that call. Whereas Akashic records, we're going to delve into your past life experiences, future life experiences. It's definitely a different process, follows a more formal process where there's a prayer that we use to open the records and more of structure to it. So a little bit different.
Okay, so if you were deciding which one to book, maybe would you recommend the intuitive one first, and then you can assess if we need to start tapping those records?
I would say if you're facing a specific issue, if you're facing a specific challenge, then I would go with an intuitive reading. If you are trying to gain more understanding of who you are and why you're here, then I would book an Akashic record reading.
Okay, because that's going to give us more information about, like, and she's got free stuff. You have a free Finding Your Purpose guide.
I do.
So if you're out there looking for your purpose, you might want to download that today. And then you have a guide to a spiritual awakening. So what's that one all about? What's that guide?
So both guides are meant to open you up to whatever you have going on in your life and give you an idea of whether or not you are experiencing a spiritual awakening. And if you are experiencing a spiritual awakening, what do you do about it? So there's some free guides. Again, they're just initial processes for people who are first exploring.
To get you started thinking about it, yes. Because my thought is if you're wondering if you're in a spiritual awakening, you probably are.
Yeah.
Because people don't think about that if they're not kind of heading into one, I would think. Unless you're just listening to this episode and like, nope, you're not. But I'm going to guess you are. I'm just going to say I'm going to guess you are. If you're even listening to this podcast, you are. Okay. So and then you've got a little gratitude journal that kind of pairs well with reading the book. Yeah. Right? It sounds really good. You guys transform your life in 30 days. Yes. I think we can all get on board with that. And then you also do other mentoring too. Do you do like kind of businessy mentoring too?
So it depends. So I do spiritual mentorship and coaching, and it's meant for anybody who is facing challenges in their life who's trying to gain clarity. So it could be that you've had a transition with your job. It could be that you're going through a divorce. It could be that you're leaving organized religion. You're in some season of transition. And in that season of transition, you're looking for support. The program that I have is 3 months long, and it is meant to help you to first understand why you are the way you are. So we delve into things about your childhood, how you were raised, what that was like. And then we go into understanding how you are now and how that impact of your childhood plays into who you are now. And then we go into giving you modalities to help you to understand that you can, in fact, shift your life. It is an absolutely amazing mentorship program. And
yeah, is this just with you, or did you team up with Nimish?
So we do individual. So we have programs, the program we run separately, but we also do it together. So you can book a free discovery call on my website to either work with me or to work with me and Nimesh and find out a little bit more about mentorship. And we explain on that call what it's about. And we get to know you to see if the program is aligned with you.
Okay, if it feels like a good fit. So you can do the free call. And even before the free call, you could just book an intuitive reading and see if you guys click, right? Because it's important. If you're going to have someone coaching you, you gotta feel the right vibes. It's got to feel like a fit. And if it's not a fit, that's okay. Right, Stacey? I mean, like, you want someone that's a good fit for this also.
Yeah, because you're entering into a very intimate relationship, right? We're not talking about surface stuff like what you had for dinner. Like, we're delving into your history. Like your therapist almost.
You're going into some traumatic things from your life, right? And you want it to be someone you feel safe and comfortable talking to. Right? Yes. Okay. So she's got all the things. And you guys know I put everything in the show notes. Always, I've got all kinds of links. And so you can read this book. And it just feels, listen, it's just like sometimes watching reality TV, right? When you hear other people's stories, you can get out of your own head and hear their stories and what they've been through. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, okay, I think I can start looking at my stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the only one. We can get, if she can get through all of this, I can get through what I'm going through. I think that's what's great about these books sometimes is that you get to hear other people's stories, how they got through it, and then you come out of it ready to maybe deal with your own shit. That's all I'm saying. Like, I feel, that's what I love books like this for, the memoir, because it's a memoir, right? Yeah. Basically, with tips and tricks in it. Also, and little prompts to get you thinking about things at the end of the chapters and journaling and doing all the things she's been talking about because she's honing in on the same thing we do almost every episode. Meditation, spending time alone, put your phone down, turn the TV off, like be with yourself and find your people. Yeah, we got to find our people to help us through it. And so if this feels like you're connecting with Stacey, then you got to explore this. I'm a firm believer in that because so I found you guys when I was listening to your podcast and that's all in the show notes too, but they've got their own podcast she talked about. And so I was listening to them and I usually, like I've told my listeners, if I'm listening to a podcast or reading a book and I feel like that person would connect with me or whatever, I'll book it. And that's not everybody because I listen to podcasts or I read a book and I'm like, meh, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't feel that super deep. That doesn't feel like someone that's part of my plan or my path. And so I move on. Right. And so that's how I booked with you guys is just a feeling. Yeah. It's part of this trusting your intuition, guys, really right? Is. Tapping into it and going like, this feels right or this doesn't feel right. Because once you start getting used to going with your gut and your intuition, you're going to make way better decisions.
So true.
Am I right? Yes. And Stacey knows because she's had to tap into that and go through some stuff over and over and over and over.
Yeah, that is true.
Yes, it is from childhood on, which I feel like we all have. Anyway, this has been good, Stacey. I think that the right people are going to hear this and it's going to give them that little ray of hope because I do get emails from listeners that tell me some of the things they're going through. And could I maybe find someone who could talk about this, that, and the other? And so this will be good because I mean, you have so many things in your story for people to connect with. If you don't connect with one of the, like she's been through another thing, guys. she knows the things. Yeah. And she's not, and she's not, and you're not judgy. I like to tell people my own opinions too. She's not judgy. And I think you can really connect with her and make it happen. If you need someone, if you're struggling at home right now and you need someone, you have to find a person and it cannot be your friends or family.
Yeah.
I know that's hard to hear because we think we're surrounded with all the people we need. We're not.
That's so true.
We're just not. God will bring into your life exactly who's supposed to help you next. So keep your eyes and ears open.
That's so true.
And be ready for that person. Be ready for that person. They're coming. Yeah. They're going to come for you. If you've got your eyes open for it, you will see them and you'll connect. Oh, Stacey. Okay, this has been good. I'm excited. And I was excited actually that I was prompted to go back and read through parts of your book again after I'd already read the whole thing because it kind of refreshed my mind too. I loved it.
Well, I'm honored to be here with you and I love what you're doing and I love that you're helping people in such a big way. It's a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah, it's been really good. It's been healing for me and I'm hoping healing for others.
I'm sure.
That's the plan, guy, which I've already had people reach out and talk about, things that they've heard or things they've pursued after hearing an episode that have like changed their lives. So, and I haven't even been doing this very long at all. I'm a newbie, and it's already helping people. So I'm excited to see how it grows and helps even more.
It's amazing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome. Stacey, you guys check out everything in the show notes and see if you guys are a fit. Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you, Jen.
Listen, I know your time is valuable. And right now I'm feeling super grateful and totally humbled that you chose to hang out with me today. If this podcast resonates with you, could you do me a solid and hit that subscribe or follow button? That's going to help you out because you're never going to miss an episode. And it helps me out because you're never going to miss an episode. And if you have like 30 seconds more, Could you leave a 5-star rating and maybe leave a kick-ass review? Thank you so much, and I can't wait to continue our journey on the next episode. Oh, and I can't forget the fine print. You know, the legal jargon. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We're just two friends on this journey together, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional. You get it. See you next time.